Grace Mullane was 22, full of life and ambition, exploring the world one city at a time. Her Instagram was filled with snapshots of breathtaking landscapes, her infectious smile, and captions brimming with optimism. Auckland, New Zealand, was meant to be just another stop on her adventure, a city to explore, people to meet, memories to create. But on December 1st, 2018, Grace swiped right on Tinder, meeting Jesse Kempson, a man whose friendly demeanor masked something far darker. That night, a casual date would lead to an unimaginable tragedy, one that would shock not just her family and friends but the entire world. What began as an evening of laughter and connection spiraled into a nightmare that ended with Grace's life cut tragically short. And the questions left behind were as haunting as the crime itself. How could this happen, and why? This is the story of Grace Mullane, a vibrant young woman whose journey of self-discovery ended in unthinkable horror. A story of trust betrayed, innocence lost, and a predator hiding in plain sight. Grace Mullane was more than just a traveler. She was a dreamer. Born and raised in the quiet town of Wickford in Essex, England, Grace grew up surrounded by the love and support of her close-knit family. Her father, David, often called her the glue that held their family together. With her kind heart and infectious smile, Grace was the kind of person who left a lasting impression wherever she went. At 22, Grace had already accomplished so much. She had recently graduated from the University of Lincoln with a degree in advertising and marketing, a field she was deeply passionate about. But even with her academic success, Grace yearned for something more, a chance to see the world, to meet new people, and to explore her true self beyond the confines of her hometown. Her travels weren't just about ticking destinations off a list. They were a journey of self-discovery. Grace had planned a gap year to explore new cultures and gain a fresh perspective before diving into the next chapter of her life. Her Instagram chronicled her adventures, smiling selfies in Peru, snapshots of breathtaking landscapes, and captions that reflected her optimism and zest for life. Her parents supported her journey wholeheartedly, though they were naturally nervous about their youngest daughter traveling alone. Every week, Grace would call home, sharing stories of the people she'd met and the experiences that had broadened her horizons. For her family, those calls were a lifeline, a way to stay connected to their adventurous daughter, even when she was halfway across the world. Grace's gap year wasn't just about travel, it was about finding herself. She had dreams of working in advertising, of building a career where her creativity and passion could shine. But more than that, she wanted to live a life full of meaning, connection, and joy. A life where she could continue to make people smile just as she always had. Her journey brought her to Auckland, New Zealand in late November 2018. It was supposed to be another exciting chapter in her adventure. But what Grace didn't know, what no one could have foreseen, was that Auckland would be the final stop in her journey. Grace Mullane was a bright, ambitious young woman with her whole life ahead of her, and as we move forward, the contrast between the vibrancy of her dreams and the tragedy that followed only becomes more heartbreaking. December 1st, 2018, started like any other day in Grace Mullane's adventure. A day filled with new possibilities, new faces, and new stories to tell. Grace, ever curious and eager to connect, swiped through Tinder, a platform that had become a familiar tool for meeting people while traveling. That's when she matched with Jesse Kempson, a man who seemed charming enough to spark her interest. They quickly arranged to meet that evening. What Grace didn't know, what none of us ever could have known, was that this seemingly ordinary date would mark the beginning of the end. This wasn't just another evening out. This was the moment that her vibrant journey collided with a darkness she couldn't have anticipated. At 5:45 p.m., CCTV cameras captured Grace and Jesse meeting for the first time outside Sky City in Auckland. There she was, smiling, confident, dressed for a night of fun. Jesse greeted her, a casual figure who appeared at first glance completely unassuming. The two headed to a nearby bar where more cameras documented their evening, images of them talking, laughing, and sharing drinks.
In these snapshots of time, Grace looked happy, her guard down, enjoying the kind of carefree evening we all hope for on a date. But knowing what we do now, These moments are almost too painful to watch. Did she sense anything off? Did she ever imagine that the man sitting across from her would betray the trust she had so freely given? As the evening unfolded, the pair seemed to grow more comfortable with each other. Around 9:30 p.m., they were seen leaving the bar together. Grace's body language showed no signs of worry, no hesitation as they walked toward Jesse's apartment on Queen Street. Cameras followed their journey as they entered the building, Grace unaware that she was stepping into what would be the final chapter of her life. This was the last time Grace Mullane was seen alive. A young woman who had spent her life seeking connection and meaning had unknowingly placed her trust in a man who would shatter everything she stood for. The excitement of that night, the laughter they shared. It all feels tainted in hindsight, shadowed by the horror that was to come. And as viewers, we're left to wrestle with the emotions this story stirs up. Excitement for the life Grace was living, but profound sadness for how that life was so cruelly taken away. What happened next would not only change Grace's story, but reveal a darkness that would shock the world. Inside the walls of Jesse Kempson's apartment, the night unfolded into a series of events that only two people would ever truly know. Grace Mullane and Jesse Kempson. One would never speak again. The other, he would tell a story no one could believe. Jesse claimed it was consensual, a night of passion that took a tragic turn. He told police they'd engaged in rough sex, and Grace had asked to be choked. He said it went too far. An accident, he called it. But the evidence told a different story. Forensic experts found bruises on Grace's neck, deep, deliberate, the kind that required sustained pressure, far beyond what any consensual act would involve. This wasn't a fleeting moment of loss of control. It was calculated, controlled, final. What was Jesse thinking as he stood there? Did he feel panic, guilt, or nothing at all? And what about Grace in her last moments? Did she realize what was happening? Did she plead? Did she fight back? Forensic evidence suggested she did. Scratches on Jesse's chest, her fingernails broken, her body showing signs of struggle. She didn't go quietly. Grace fought for her life. But Jesse didn't call for help. He didn't show remorse. Instead, he planned, coldly, methodically. The next morning, he bought a suitcase, cleaning supplies. He stuffed Grace's lifeless body into that suitcase, zipped it shut, and went about his day as if nothing had happened. 2 days later, he rented a car. He drove to the Waitakere Ranges, a dense and remote forest outside Auckland. There, he dug a shallow grave and buried Grace, as if that could erase what he'd done. But guilt has a way of leaving marks. Surveillance footage captured Jesse buying coffee, walking through the city, acting normal. How does someone do that? How does someone commit such an act and then blend back into the world as if nothing had changed? Did he feel powerful? Or was he desperately trying to cling to the illusion that he could get away with it? Grace's body was found a week later. Police followed the breadcrumbs Jesse left behind. CCTV footage, receipts, digital trails, all pointing back to him. And when they confronted him, his story unraveled just as quickly as his mask of normalcy. What happened in that apartment was horrifying. What happened after was chilling. Jesse didn't just take Grace's life. He erased her humanity, reducing her to something disposable. And yet, as the evidence piled up, he would continue to claim it was all just an accident. But could anyone believe him? Grace Mullane's parents knew something was wrong when their calls and messages to wish her a happy birthday on December 2nd, 2018, went unanswered. Grace never missed a chance to connect with her family, especially on such an important day. Concern turned to dread, and by December 5th, they reported her missing. That report would set off an investigation that would uncover a harrowing truth. The search for Grace began with a meticulous reconstruction of her final days. CCTV cameras in Auckland became the investigators' most valuable tool. They tracked Grace meeting Jesse Kempson on December 1st, sharing drinks at a bar, and returning to his apartment later that night. But after she entered the building, Grace disappeared. Police turned their attention to Jesse Kempson, who quickly became their primary person of interest. When detectives knocked on his door, Jesse admitted to meeting Grace and spending the night with her, but he claimed she left his apartment the next morning. His calm, cooperative demeanor masked the truth. until the evidence started to tell a different story. Receipts revealed that on December 2nd, Jesse purchased cleaning supplies in a large suitcase. GPS data from a rental car showed he had driven to the Waitakere Ranges, a remote forested area, the very place where Grace's body would later be discovered. Investigators also uncovered digital evidence, including disturbing online searches that painted a picture of premeditation. Faced with mounting pressure, Jesse maintained his innocence. During police interrogations, he denied involvement in Grace's death, insisting it was a tragic accident during consensual rough sex. But the evidence told another story, one of cold calculation and a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. Forensic analysis of Grace's body revealed deep bruising around her neck, consistent with sustained strangulation. This wasn't a fleeting moment of panic, but a deliberate act, lasting long enough to extinguish a life. Investigators also found scratches and abrasions on Jesse's body, indicating that Grace had fought back, a desperate attempt to survive. Digging into Jesse's past, detectives uncovered a disturbing history of violence against women. Former partners came forward with stories of manipulation, aggression, and coercion. Jesse Kempson wasn't just a man caught in a tragic accident. He was a predator whose dangerous behavior had escalated to its most horrifying conclusion. Piece by piece, police unraveled the story Jesse tried to bury, both literally and figuratively. Grace's disappearance wasn't a mystery, it was a crime. And as the evidence mounted, it became clear that justice for Grace would require exposing every dark detail of Jesse's actions. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, spectators, and Grace's grieving family gathered as the trial of Jesse Kempson began in November 2019. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case, a story of calculated violence and deceit. They presented a damning trail of evidence, CCTV footage of Grace and Jesse together, receipts for cleaning supplies in the suitcase used to bury her, forensic analysis that detailed the horrific nature of her death. But the most chilling piece? Witness testimonies. Several women came forward, recounting their experiences with Jesse Kempson. They painted a portrait of a man who had a pattern of manipulation, coercion, and violence. Grace wasn't his first victim. She was simply the one who didn't make it out alive. Prosecutors revealed text messages Grace had sent friends during her travels, messages full of excitement and hope. These were contrasted with Jesse's own texts and search history, which painted a far darker picture. In the days leading up to Grace's death, Jesse had searched for ways to conceal a body. This wasn't rough sex gone wrong. This was premeditation. But Jesse's defense team had a different story. They argued that Grace's death was a tragic accident during consensual rough sex. They claimed that Jesse panicked after realizing she had died and made poor decisions in his desperation to avoid being blamed. To support their argument, the defense pointed to Jesse's demeanor during police interrogations, suggesting he was cooperative and deeply regretful. They also attempted to challenge the timeline of events, casting doubt on the prosecution's theory of premeditation. It was a strategy aimed not at proving Jesse's innocence, but at planting just enough doubt to reduce the charge to manslaughter. But the jury wasn't convinced. After hours of deliberation, they returned with their verdict: guilty of murder. Jesse Kempson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years before parole. For Grace's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been served, but no sentence could ever bring their daughter back. The verdict shocked New Zealand, but what followed was even more surprising. After the trial, it was revealed that Jesse was facing multiple charges for similar crimes against other women. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a pattern, a chilling realization that Grace's murder wasn't just a tragic anomaly, but the culmination of a predator's escalating behavior. Public outrage was swift and unforgiving. Jesse Kempson became a symbol of everything society fears in the online dating world. A man who appeared charming on the surface, but hid a dangerous darkness underneath. And as more details emerged, it became clear that the justice served for Grace was just the beginning of accountability for Jesse Kempson. The trial was over, but the questions lingered. How many others had suffered in silence before Grace? Could her death have been prevented? And most haunting of all, what was it about Jesse Kempson that allowed him to slip through the cracks, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Grace Mullane's story isn't just about a Tinder date gone tragically wrong. It's a wake-up call for how we navigate modern relationships and trust in strangers. Dating apps have revolutionized the way we connect, but they've also introduced new risks. How well can you truly know someone from a profile and a few messages? Grace's tragic encounter with Jesse Kempson serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface. This case also opened a much-needed conversation about the reality of violence against women, a reality that transcends borders and social classes. Grace wasn't the first victim of such brutality, and sadly, she won't be the last. Her story became a global symbol of the vulnerability women face every day, simply for existing in a world where trust can be weaponized against them. From New Zealand to the UK and beyond, the outrage sparked by Grace's murder led to demands for better safety measures, both online and offline. It also ignited efforts to educate individuals about the importance of setting boundaries, recognizing red flags, and always prioritizing personal safety. But amidst the tragedy, there's Grace's legacy, a legacy her family has worked tirelessly to preserve. Through their heartbreak, they found strength to raise awareness and support victims of violence. Their efforts remind us that while we can't change the past, we can fight to prevent similar tragedies in the future. So as we reflect on Grace's story, we're left with an uncomfortable but necessary question. How can we create a world where this doesn't happen again? What steps can we take to better protect those who are vulnerable and ensure that trust isn't exploited as a weapon? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice could help drive the change we so desperately need. And this is just the beginning. In our next video, we'll unravel another harrowing tale where trust leads to tragedy, a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Don't miss it. Stay tuned.